Hey, what is going on guys? My name is Floriiss and welcome back to another Crypt of the NecroDancer Boss Guide video. In today's episode we're taking a look at the Deep Blues boss fight. Deep Blues is the fourth and final non-story related boss in the game. This boss fight is basically a game of chess and the rules that apply during this fight are practically the same. The enemies move the same way as you would see during a real chess game, and the player wins the fight when the king has been eliminated. Defeating the king is sometimes not as simple as it seems. During this boss fight the king will constantly run away from the player. This is because the boss fight has a total of 2 phases, and the king will only approach the player during the final phase. The first phase consists of eliminating all of the enemies on the chessboard. This is by far the hardest part of the Deep Blues boss fight, as players need to concentrate on multiple enemies at once, and oftentimes it can be quite chaotic with a lot of enemies in such a tight space. That being said, players should be warned that every pawn will turn into a queen when they have reached the other side of the chessboard. Usually this isn't much of a big deal when there's barely any enemies around, but with more enemies remaining this can be quite troublesome. Once every enemy has been eliminated, the second phase will start. This is the easiest phase, and by reaching this phase the fight is almost a guaranteed win. Unless of course you're playing Coda, then nothing will be a guaranteed win. During the last phase, Deep Blues is finally approaching the player and moves every beat in any direction, even diagonally. From here on players should be able to easily eliminate the boss. Considering Deep Blues is a non-story related boss, this fight also has a total of 4 different variants. Fortunately enough, the type of enemies won't change during the boss variant. However, similar as to what we've seen in the core ref boss fight, the enemies and the boss himself will get stronger for each variant, meaning fights will not only take longer but will also be more difficult in general. When players encounter Deep Blues during the first zone, the boss himself will have 3 heart containers. All of the chess pieces during this fight are blue, which means that they all have 1 heart container. As for the second zone, the boss himself will still have 3 heart containers, but a minority of the chess pieces are red, which means that they have 2 heart containers. As for the third zone, the boss himself will now have 5 heart containers and all of the pawns have a red color. As for the final variant, the boss himself will still have 5 heart containers, but this time around nearly every piece on the chessboard is colored red. Now that we understand how this boss fight works, it is time for the strategies. As usual, we will take a look at the general strategies first. There is a total of 3 strategies in this category that we're going to take a look at. First up we got the quick kill strategy, second strategy is the fireball strategy, and last up we got the freeze strategy. The first strategy that we're going to take a look at is the quick kill strategy. This strategy can be executed by using a single bomb and is suitable for every Deep Blues variant. Before we take a look at the quick kill strategy, it should be mentioned that this particular strategy isn't as straightforward as you might think. There's several things to take note of when executing the strategy, and more importantly there's also a chance that it could go wrong. Worst case scenario, you can even die in the process. Fortunately enough, this chance isn't that big, but the chance is still there. Therefore players should be warned that whenever they decide to use this quick kill strategy, there's a slight risk involved. Moving on to the strategy, the first thing that you want to do is to walk to the middle doorway. From here on you want to make your way towards the second horizontal row. On the second row you want to throw your dagger forward, and once again, don't be afraid that the king isn't in your sight, as the dagger will still hit him regardless. After you throw your weapon, the king will teleport away. The king will always teleport to the third horizontal row of the room, so basically to the row in front of you. Unfortunately enough, we cannot predict to what exact tile he's going to teleport, as this is completely random. The room is exact 8 tiles wide and the king can teleport to any of those 8 tiles on the third row. Now, this is the part where luck plays a role. When the king teleports to either tiles 1 to 3 or 5 to 8, the strategy is executable. The chances of this happening is 7 out of 8 tiles, which refers to 87.5%. This is quite a lot, and because of this it's no surprise that this strategy works most of the time. Sadly, it can also happen that the king spawns on tile 4, which is exactly in front of you. The chances of this happening is 1 out of 8 tiles, which refers to 12.5%. Now, this isn't as much, and because of this you won't see this happen often, but then again, the chance will always be there. When the king spawns in front of you, it's pretty much game over. At this point, the other enemies are about to come in and you have no weapons to defend yourself with. The best thing you possibly could do is to try to bomb the boss, although mostly, if not always, you will just run away to the opposite side of the room. Let's just say it doesn't end well usually. Speaking of ending well, let us end on a good note by taking a closer look at how this strategy is successfully being executed. Whenever the king doesn't spawn in front of you, you can either spawn to the left side of you, which is on tiles 1 to 3, or to the right side of you, which is on tiles 5 to 8. Both sides have a slightly different approach to another, but are fairly straightforward once you get the hang of it. We're starting off with the right side first. Whenever the king spawns on the right side, take the following steps. The first thing that you want to do is go up. From here on you want to make 3 steps to the right, so right, right, right. At this point you want to place a bomb. From here on you want to go down, down, and when you're on the bottom go to the left. By using this exact route you will always chase the king into the corner and from there on further into your bomb, which will instantly kill him. Before we move on to the left side strategy, there's one important thing to take note of here. Unfortunately enough, there's a really small chance that you might take damage when placing the bomb on that location. This is because of the knights. On some really rare occasions it might happen to you that one of the knights opens the battle. This is a bad thing because this way the knight doesn't get blocked by the pawns and can reach the player relatively fast. In fact, the knight can reach the player that fast that he might be able to interfere with the strategy. Basically the position where we place our bomb is a position that the knight is able to reach, so if you happen to have a knight opening, there's a slight chance that this knight is going to hit you when you place a bomb. That is a really unfortunate moment, but luckily enough this rarely happens. Even better is that there's some kind of workaround for this, although the chance of being hit is still present. Whenever you execute the quick kill strategy on the right, always be on the lookout. When you are about to place your bomb, pay very close attention to the knights. If you notice that a knight is about to hit you, and you can see this when he is slightly lifted off the ground, then the following thing is what you can do. Rather than placing a bomb on the position as we know, instead walk one step down. From here on you want to place a bomb and then go down and left and left. By using this route you will manage to dodge the attack of the knight and can still kill off the king with your bomb. Now you're probably guessing, why don't we use this strategy in the first place? I mean, this way we will dodge the knights every time and we will always kill the king, right? So yeah, why don't we use it? Well, that is because this strategy can still go wrong regardless. In fact, it is slightly riskier than the previous strategy, as most of the time the queen is able to catch up to you. That is why we don't want to make use of this strategy regularly. This is basically our plan B if plan A tends to go wrong. Okay, so hopefully that didn't sound too confusing. Long story short, if the king spawns on the right side, you have a plan A and a plan B strategy. What kind of strategy you execute will depend on whether the knight is able to hit you or not. If the knight is out of your reach, go for the plan A strategy, but if you notice that the knight is about to hit you, then go for the plan B strategy. And that basically sums it up for the right side approach of the quick kill strategy. Now we're moving on to the left side. Whenever the king spawns on the left side, take the following steps. The first thing that you want to do is to go up. From here you want to go down, then left, left, place a bomb, down, right, right. By using this exact route, you will always chase the king into the corner and from there on further into your bomb, which will instantly kill him. The good news about the king spawning on the left side is that this time around there's nothing to worry about. When going for the quick kill strategy on the left, it is not possible for the knights to hit you when you are about to place your bomb. This is because this time around we are positioned one row lower than the previous time and that is pretty much out of range for the knights. And this is even when a knight decides to open the battle, so that is definitely a positive thing. Before we move on to see what characters can use this strategy, it is important to address a few things. Firstly, and this should be pretty obvious by now, but the quick kill strategy can only be executed by using a throwable weapon such as the dagger or a spear, any other weapon and you're not able to execute this strategy. Next to that, it is important to mention that this time around the boss does take damage from your throw. Previously on during the Coda fight, we've seen that the first throw didn't do any damage to the boss. He was basically invulnerable. As for Deep Blues, this isn't the case. Deep Blues does in fact take damage from your throw, and that is both a good thing as well as a bad thing. The good news is that by using this strategy we can in fact instantly kill the boss if our build is strong enough. So all you have to do is just throw your weapon if you got like a +5 damage output and boom, gone. Moreover, it also allows us to use the quick kill strategy in the first place. This is because the bomb does 4 damage and the latter versions of Deep Blues have 5 hurt containers. If our throw didn't do any damage, then we wouldn't be able to pull this off on the stronger variants. So there's definitely a good thing to this. Unfortunately enough, there's also a downside to it. When using Coda or Monk, you want to be very careful with this strategy. When you have items that increase your damage output, you might be able to instantly kill the boss with your throw. What will happen is that your weapon will land on a pile of gold, and this way you cannot pick up your weapon anymore. So when playing as these characters, it is very important that you keep track of your damage output and from there on decide whether you want to use this strategy or not. Moving on to see what characters can use this strategy. Out of all characters in the game, there's going to be a total of 3 characters that cannot use this strategy. These are Dorian, Eli and Melody, and the reason for this is that all of these characters are unable to throw any weapon, and as we know, no throwable weapon is no quick kill strategy. The next strategy that we're going to take a look at is the Fireball strategy. If you have been following the guide videos along, you should be familiar with this strategy, as it's pretty much the same strategy that we used during the Coral Riff boss fight. If not, no worries, let me quickly explain how this strategy works. The Fireball strategy is a very simple strategy to execute and makes this fight an absolute cakewalk. All you have to do is to enter the fight through the middle doorway, make your way to the 3rd row, throw your weapon and immediately use the Fireball spell or scroll. By doing so you will instantly kill the boss, simple as that. Before we move on to see what characters can use this strategy, there's a few things to point out. For this strategy, the same 2 things apply as for the quick kill strategy. If you don't have a throwable weapon, this strategy cannot be executed. Make sure you possess over a dagger or a spear, otherwise you're going to have a hard time executing this strategy. Moreover, be cautious when executing this strategy as either Coda or Monk. If you don't pay close attention to your damage output, you might accidentally kill the boss and thereby lose your weapon. Next to that, players should be warned that the Fireball spell only does 3 damage, so this means that whenever the player doesn't have any damage boost items, the Fireball spell is only capable of eliminating Deep Blues 1 and Deep Blues 2. As for Deep Blues 3 and Deep Blues 4, they have 5 hurt containers. Therefore, without any damage boost items, the Fireball spell simply doesn't do enough damage. Always keep that in mind when using the Fireball spell. As for the Fireball scroll, this doesn't matter because, as we know, this item does a total of 8 damage and is therefore capable of killing any Deep Blues variant without any issue. Moving on to see what characters can use this strategy. Out of all characters in the game, there's going to be a total of 3 characters that cannot use this strategy. These are Dorian, Eli and Melody, and the reason for this is similar to what we've seen in the previous strategies. All these characters are unable to throw any weapon, and without a throwable weapon, this Fireball strategy cannot be executed. The last strategy that we're going to take a look at is the Floriiss strategy. Similar to the Fireball strategy, this is a very simple strategy to execute and makes this boss fight an absolute cakewalk. All you have to do is to enter the fight through the middle doorway. From here on, try to get as close as possible to the boss. Once you're standing as close as possible to the boss, without being hit obviously, from here on you want to activate your Floriiss spell or scroll. During this time you want to ignore the remaining enemies and go straight for the boss. From here on you can easily take him out, simple as that. Before we move on to see what characters can use this strategy, there's one important thing to take note of. It is important to mention that you need to be cautious when using the Floriiss spell on the later Deep Blues variants, so either Deep Blues 3 or Deep Blues 4. The effect of the Floriiss spell only lasts for a total of 8 beats. Usually this is enough time to safely take out even the later Deep Blues variants, but it can still become a close call, especially if there are several enemies between yourself and the boss when activating the spell. Therefore you want to make sure that whenever you use the Floriiss spell, that you're standing really close to the boss. If not, there's a high chance you won't be able to eliminate the boss before the Floriiss effect has worn off, and that might cause some issues. As for the Floriiss scroll, this shouldn't be a problem. There's plenty of time when using the Floriiss scroll and it's pretty much a guaranteed win. Moving on to see what characters can use the Floriiss strategy. Out of all characters in the game, there's going to be a total of 2 characters that cannot use this strategy. These are Coda and Monk, and both of them share the same reason. The freeze strategy requires players to get really close to the boss, and during this time there's often several chess pieces that needs to be taken out first. When taking out these chess pieces, they will drop gold, and when you step into gold as Coda or Monk, you will instantly die. In other words, the gold will prevent you from reaching the boss in the first place, and therefore the strategy doesn't work. Sure thing, you could kill a few enemies and create an opening and from there use the freeze spell or the scroll, but to be fair, this makes things a lot more complicated and it isn't really recommended. In the end, when using the freeze strategy, you want to rush as much as possible, whereas when playing as Monk or Coda, it is often better to have a slower yet safer approach. If you want, go ahead, but don't come back to me and say, it didn't work out. Because I told you, man, I told you. But yeah, might be better off just using that for another boss. Alright, so the strategies that have been explained in the previous chapter, they work pretty well and most of the time it makes the Deep Blues boss fight pretty easy to deal with. However, fighting off Deep Blues without any items is a whole different story though. In this section, we are going to dive into the low percent strategies. Out of all bosses in the game, Deep Blues is probably one of the hardest one to low percent. It is pretty inconsistent in a way and there's also a lot of things that can happen. Not only skill is a huge factor here, but also luck comes in play. Because of this, there's also not one way of doing it right, there's actually many ways of doing it right, but there's also many ways of doing it wrong. Before we take a closer look at the low percent approach, it should be mentioned that this time around we're not going to look at each variant individually. This is because we're going to use an approach that is suitable for each and every Deep Blues variant. Not to mention that Deep Blues is a boss where every enemy stays the same for each variant. Sure thing, they might get stronger over time, but then again, a lot of Deep Blues variants play really similar to each other. Because of this, there's not really a point to cover each variant individually, otherwise it's going to be a lot of unnecessary repeating things over and over again, so that is why we're going to look at one variant only, which is going to be the strongest variant of them all, Deep Blues 4. Once you've mastered the Deep Blues 4 boss fight, you can use the same strategy for the remaining boss variants. So it definitely makes things a lot easier this time around as we only have to go through one single strategy. Alright, let's get down to business. Moving on to the Deep Blues 4 boss fight. The first thing that you want to do is to enter the fight through the left door. From here on it's a matter of prioritizing. The enemies in the room that have the highest priority are both the knights and the queen. You want to take out those enemies as fast as you possibly can. This is also the reason why we want to enter the fight through the left door, as this way we are closest positioned to one of the knights. From here on, you want to move in a straight line towards the top left knight. At this point there's two things that can happen. Either you get blocked by a pawn, or the knight is actually faster than the pawn and as a result of this he will stand in front of the pawn, which means you can freely attack him. Both scenarios have a slightly different approach, but eventually it all comes down to the same thing. Let's take a look at both scenarios and see how we can approach matters the best way. The first scenario is when you get blocked by the pawn. This isn't much of a big deal and you can still solve this issue pretty quickly. Once you get blocked by a pawn, take the following steps. The first thing that you want to do is to eliminate the pawn that is standing in front of you, and once you've eliminated him, take one step backwards and then one step to the right. At this point, the knight will stand in front of you and from here on you can eliminate him. Now, the good news about this position is that the other knight and the queen can reach this position relatively fast. This means that once you eliminate the first knight, you should hang around the area a bit more and wait for the other knight and queen to come in. Once you've taken down both of the knights and the queen, it is time to clean up the rest. At this point, you want to focus on all of the enemies on the right side of the room. Make absolutely sure, and this is very important, that you leave the first pawn on the left alone. Preferably the second pawn as well. Don't even bother with those pawns, simply ignore them for the entire time and let them turn into queens. Now, there's a reason why we want to do this and we will get back to that reason later on. But for now, make sure you simply ignore them and focus on the rest. Once you've taken out all of the enemies, it's simply a matter of killing off the blues, and this is by far the easiest stage of the fight.
simply keep hopping back and forward and let Deep Blues come towards you. From here on you can easily eliminate him. Moving on to the second scenario, the free passage. This scenario might occur when the knight is faster than the pawn. This means that the knight ends up standing in front of the pawn rather than behind him, which gives us a free passageway towards the knight. We want to use this to our advantage. Once you notice that the road is clear, make your way towards the knight and start to attack him. While attacking the knight, pay very close attention to what the queen is about to do. There's in fact multiple things that can happen from here on, and our approach to the fight will depend on what the queen is going to do. Simply said, there's two things that can happen from here on, and we're going to look at both of those scenarios. It's pretty funny how we were talking about this particular scenario and suddenly two new scenarios appeared. That just tells how diverse this boss fight can actually be, so yeah, let's take a look at both of them. The first scenario that can happen is that the queen is able to move in a straight line towards the player, so diagonally in a straight line. This is a good thing because from the moment you kill the knight, she will instantly take the spot. Unless of course you're fighting with a weaker version of Deep Blues, then it might take a little bit longer for the queen to arrive. Either way, when she moves in a straight line, she will end up standing in front of you, and from here on you can finish her off. Once that's done, you still have some time to focus on the surrounding enemies. Even though the knight has the highest priority over them all, it's a good idea to let the knight come towards you while you take out some more enemies. Once the other knight is getting pretty close, start to approach him, and after you kill him, focus on the remaining enemies on the right side of the room. From here on, it's simply a matter of cleaning up the rest and eliminating the boss. As for the other scenario, it can happen that the queen isn't able to move in a straight line towards the player. This is when her path gets blocked by a pawn or another piece on the chessboard. When this happens, she moves downwards instead, and from there diagonally, so not in a straight line diagonally, but first downwards and then diagonally. And that is a bad thing, because when she approaches you, she will have an angle on you. When you notice that the queen moves downwards, so not diagonally, but actually downwards, her path got blocked, you're not able to stay in the same position once you kill the knight. After all, the queen won't end up standing on the same spot where you kill the knight, but in fact she ends up standing diagonally of you. At this point you will have to back up and kill her that way. When you're backing up, make sure to move to the right side as well, and this way you will be closer towards the last knight, and from there on you can easily kill him. Once the knight has been taken out, it's simply a matter of taking out the remaining enemies on the right side and eventually take out the boss himself. Alright, so hopefully that didn't sound too confusing. I can totally understand if you're all confused about this. In the end, there's simply so many possibilities when it comes down to this boss fight. Although the scenarios that have been explained are the most common ones, and by using those strategies, you should be able to get through most of the fights. That being said, let us make a small recap to put everything that has been said into perspective. First thing that you want to do is to enter the fight through the left door. From here on, walk in a straight line towards the knight. At this point, you can either get blocked by a pawn or have a free passageway. When being blocked by the pawn, kill the pawn and back up, so take one step to the back and one step to the right. From here on, kill the knight, followed up by the other knight and the queen, and from there on take out the rest. As for the other scenario, if your path turned out to be free, so no pawn blocking you, start making your way towards the knight and attack him. While you're attacking the knight, make sure that you watch the queen. If the queen comes in a straight line, you can stay on your same spot. At this point you can easily kill off the queen and some of the surrounding enemies. Let the other knight come towards you, and from there on finish off the rest. However, if the queen has an angle on you, simply back away once you kill the knight, so this time around don't stay on the same spot as you will get hit. So make sure you back away, and once you back away you can safely eliminate the queen. From here on focus on the other knight, and from there on take out the rest. Moving on to the final strategies, aka the character specific strategies. When it comes down to Deep Blues, there's quite a few different character specific strategies, and once again we will take a look at each character in the game and see how we can approach this boss fight the best way possible. As for Aria, Bart, Bolt and Cadence, the approach for this boss fight stays the same as what has been explained in the previous chapters. As for Dorian, the approach for this boss fight is nearly the same as what has been explained in the previous chapters, although the beginning section is a bit different.
When entering the room as Dorian, it is highly recommended that you don't approach the knight all the way through. This is because of Dorian's boots. Dorian is able to reach the other side of the room quite fast, and because of this the chess pieces barely had any time to move. As a result of this, you're even deeper into enemy territory, and chances are that you might get hit by one of the chess pieces. Because of this, you want to give the other chess pieces a little bit more time to move. Once you enter the room, make sure you jump back and forward on the same spot, so this way the enemies can move a little bit, and from there on start engaging those enemies. This is a lot safer than rushing all the way through. As for Eli, the approach is completely different from everything that has been explained thus far. Despite the fact that Eli is not able to throw any weapons, he is still able to quickly eliminate all of the Deep Blues variants. This is done by kicking the bomb into the direction of the boss. As for the first two Deep Blues variants, so Deep Blues 1 and Deep Blues 2, Eli is able to quickly eliminate them with a single bomb. This is how it works. From the moment you enter the fight, make your way to the 4th row. From here on, you want to place a bomb, you want to take a step back, and you want to kick the bomb forward. Easy. As for the later Deep Blues variants, so Deep Blues 3 and Deep Blues 4, Eli is able to quickly eliminate them as well, and this is done by using 2 bombs. This is how it works. Start off by doing the exact same thing as the previous quick kill strategy. Make your way to the 4th row, place a bomb, take a step back and kick the bomb forward. After you kick the bomb forward, immediately place another bomb. Once you place your second bomb, immediately move to the left or the right, and this will depend on the position of the king. We want to move towards the opposite side of the king. From here on, kick the bomb into the direction of the king and this will finish him off. Both of the quick kill strategies for Eli work 100% of the time and makes this fight incredibly easy to deal with. Therefore it's strongly recommended that you always use this strategy when playing as Eli. As for Melody, the approach is the same as what has been explained in the previous chapters, although there's one slight thing to take note of here. When playing as Melody, the Deep Blues fight is actually not as bad as you might think. In fact, Deep Blues is probably one of the easiest bosses for Melody. This is because of the golden loot. This weapon can attack in multiple directions, and because of this you can easily take out many chess pieces at once. That being said, it is highly recommended that you play as passive as possible when playing as Melody. Once you take out the knights and the queen, try not to rush through the chessboard to eliminate the remaining enemies. Instead, stay a little bit in the back. From here on, you want to let the pawns and the other chess pieces come towards you. By jumping back and forward from a small distance, you shouldn't be able to take any damage and will automatically take out the chess pieces once they're getting close. This is probably the safest way to go by when playing as Melody. As for Coda or Monk, the approach for these characters is slightly different than the other characters, as fighting off Deep Blues as Monk or Coda is nowhere near as straightforward as you might think. When fighting off Deep Blues as either Monk or Coda, every chess piece will drop a piece of gold. This makes this fight a lot harder, as not only you will have to deal with every enemy on the chessboard, but also you will need to make sure that you don't accidentally block your way towards the exit. Not to mention that there's also a possibility that you might close yourself in between gold when killing surrounding enemies. Because of these downsides, we have to be more careful, which means our approach to the fight is going to be slightly different. When playing as Monk, it is highly recommended that you don't walk up to each chess piece individually. Instead, whenever you kill one of the chess pieces, simply wait. This is because there's a high chance that another chess piece ends up standing on the exact same spot. This way you can take out multiple chess pieces on the same spot. By doing so, there's less gold laying around the area and this decreases the chance of your path being blocked towards the exit. Special thanks to player Grovando for pointing this out. Moreover, it should be mentioned that this time around it is not recommended to take out all of the chess pieces on the right. The reason of this is because there's a high chance you might get closed off in the bottom right corner. Therefore we want to take out only a few chess pieces on the right and from there on make our way towards the top of the room. Now remember why we had to leave the first two pawns alone? This is exactly the reason. By leaving the first two pawns alone, there's always going to be a path open towards the other side. And this is extremely useful when playing as either Coda or Monk. Use this open path to your advantage and make your way to the other side of the room. Once you're on the other side of the room, it is simply a matter of taking out the remaining enemies. As for the remaining pawns, simply leave them be Let them become queens, and this way they will automatically come towards you. You can safely eliminate them near the top of the room. And that, ladies and gentlemen, sums it up for the Deep Blues boss fight. Hopefully this guide will aid you in defeating this boss fight more easily. If there's still a strategy that you're aware of but has not been covered in this guide yet, feel free to leave a comment down below, as not only am I curious to see what this strategy is about, but also it might help out other players who are trying to get better at this particular boss fight. Speaking of boss fights, at this point we've been through all of the 4 non-story related bosses. That is very good news, as the remaining 4 bosses are tied to a specific character. This means that the overall time of the upcoming guides is going to drastically decrease. For those guides, we don't have to go through each specific character or each specific variant. There's one boss variant for one character, and that is it. So definitely a good thing, as it's less watch time for you guys and less editing time for me, so yeah, definitely a win-win situation. That being said, I would like to thank you all for watching, especially to the people that have been following these guides all the way through. I'm pretty sure that a lot of people are turned off by the length of these guides. But then again, I want to make sure that everything is covered, as this will set you up for the best possible scenario. I hope to see you guys in the next episode, where we will take on the first story related boss in the game, Dead Ringer. Until next time, bye!